So with the rebellion of Adam and Eve in their sin, God sends them out from the garden, and it doesn't need to tell us what direction, but it does. It says they were east on the east side of the garden is where he put the flaming cherubim with their flaming swords. And they're east, specifically said to be east of the garden. The next time we hear a direction, actually, is that Cain goes, it specifically says, Cain went away from the presence of the Lord and settled in the land of Nod, east of Eden. And so what you're supposed to picture there is Adam and Eve living on the east side of Eden, outside of the house of God, outside of the home for which they're made. Their sin has pushed them east. But now Cain, whose sin aggravates the original sin, right? He kills his brother. He goes out farther east. There's a greater movement away from God. Sin always separates. And this separation is growing and it's growing. And he's moving away in his sin from what he was made for. The place of rest, the place of his home. Now, here's the interesting thing. We actually see this same detail given for us in Genesis chapter 11, which is the story of the Tower of Babel. So that's the big story that happens, of course, after the recreation story of Noah and the flood. So Genesis chapter 11 begins like this. Now the whole earth had one language and the same words, and as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. Now, we might hear from the east and think that they're moving west, but no Bible scholar actually thinks that. What they think is they're actually going farther east. They're going from the east farther east. They're moving, again, just like Cain, away from the very presence of God. And what they're doing there is they're saying, God, we're not deciding that you can call us who we are. We're going to build a name for ourselves. We are going to be our own gods. Again, it's the same sin of Adam and Eve and Cain and Abel and Lamech and all the rest. It is a movement away from God, further away. That is the story. Going east, a movement east. But here's what I'm saying, is that they are not just simply moving away from God in sin, which is what always happens with sin. But they are moving farther and farther away from what their hearts are actually deeply longing for, what they were made for, their home, their place of rest, their place of, I can breathe again. I can be nourished. I can flourish. Sin is creating a greater distance from what they were actually most deeply desirous of, what their hearts most longed for. Sin isn't just some religious idea for pursed-lipped Sunday school teachers. No offense, Sunday school teachers, just a stereotype. Sin is a deeply real thing that actually gives greater distance from what your heart most desires. Your great desire, despite the fact you may not always admit this, is for sin to be dealt with because you long to be brought home. I long to be brought home.